Hey guys, Miata Man here. Welcome to part 3 of the alternator and power steering belt replacement video. Right now we are ready to put the new belts on. I've got the alternator loosened off nicely. It's moving all the way as far as it'll go in this direction, and it'll move all the way in that direction. Now, in order to get it to go all the way over like this, which is what we need in order to get the new belt on, we had to loosen off the pivot bolt at the bottom. That's this one right here. It's a 14 millimeter. Okay, so we had to loosen that off in order for this to be able to move freely, and we'll remember to tighten that up as well when we're done. Okay, so now that's ready to go. We're going to put that one on first, and I'm just going to put you up here so that you can watch me do it. There we are. Okay, so the alternator belt is this guy right here. This is for a 1.6 liter Miata, and it has the teeth on it. That's what they call a cog belt. So now this is different than the power steering belt. The power steering belt has grooves on it. Okay, that's how you know the difference right away. Now on a 1.8 liter car, 94 to 05, both the belts are ribbed. They're the rib belt, like this one. Okay, so you need to make sure you know which is which when you're buying them from the parts store. Make a little note on them when you pick them up. With these ones, it's obvious. So there you go. So that's the difference between the 1.6s and the 1.8s. 1.6 has cog belt for the alternator. 1.8 liters have rib belts for both the alternator and the power steering. Okay, so we're gonna feed this in. We're going to wrap it around the crank pulley and the alternator. Actually, I'll do the alternator last. I'm going to wrap it around the water pump pulley. Try and squeeze it in there. There we are. That's in. Then around the crank pulley, and that's a bit of a stretch to get it to go onto the alternator here, but there we are. So now that is in position. Now what we need to do is we need to tighten up the adjuster bolt. Now, as mentioned in the other videos, the adjuster is exactly like this one. Okay, so in order to tighten it up now, we need to turn this bolt clockwise to tighten the belt up. Okay, so I'm going to quickly do that for you. And I'll bring you around a little bit here so you can see what I'm doing. Just be a second here. It's hard to see because there's all this stuff that's in the way here, but that's the adjuster bolt hanging out here. So I'm going to turn that clockwise this way, and then you'll be able to see that alternator move towards me as we go. I should turn it by hand most of the time so we get it tight. Let's get this out of our way. And you'll be able to see better. There we go, that's better. Okay. There. So that's starting to tighten up. Now we don't want to go crazy tight right off the bat. What we want to do is make sure that it's nice and snug, but not overly tight, because if you have an old water pump, you can actually run the risk of wrecking the bearing in the water pump if you go crazy when you tighten it. So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is tighten it so that it's nice and firm, we're almost there now. And then we may need to retighten it in a few days or in a week, because this belt will stretch a little bit. And that's something that a lot of people don't tell you. So all of a sudden you've got a squeal a week later from your alternator belt. And that's normal, because these belts do stretch. So there we go. That's about as tight as I want it. That's where I'm going to leave it for now. And now that that's tight, I've got to go and lock down that nut that goes through that metal block like we showed you on the other side there. So definitely you got to remember to tighten that up. There we are. So that's locked in, nice and tight. And now, before I forget, I'm going to go down and tighten up the pivot bolt here as well. So, yes. There we go. That's the pivot bolt. Make sure you're on it all the way. You want to tighten that up so it doesn't come loose and fall out, or because I've seen that quite a few times where it comes loose and it wrecks the bolt. You've got to get a new one. There we are. So now, alternator belt is on, adjusted and tight. Now we're going to do the power steering. There we are. Okay. There's our power steering belt. This is the easy one. So I'll wrap it around the pulley. Now, let's get that moving. So in order to get it to go over this pulley here on the power steering pump, have to get this pump down all the way. When it's moved upwards this way, it's tighter, and when it's down, it lowers and it takes the tension off the belt. Let's just see if we've got it low enough. I think we need to back this off a little bit more here to give us that extra room. So we want to go counterclockwise or anti-clockwise. There we are. It gives us a little bit more. So we should be able to push it down a bit more. That ought to give us enough room to get this belt on. There we are. Now again, make sure these slots are here and here, just in case you need to get to the pivot bolt. We didn't have to loosen the pivot bolt on this power steering pump. It's fine, everything's tight, and it moved enough for us to be able to manipulate the pump up and down. So if you do have to do it though, just make sure you leave this slot in this position so you can get to that 14mm bolt right there. There, make sure the belt's seated properly on the pulleys. And once you've done that, you can physically just pull up on it like that. And then you can tighten this guy up right here. You can do it by hand to start with, and then you can tighten it up some more after that. So there we are. It's going the wrong way. It's got to go this way. It's got to go clockwise to tighten the belt, like that. There we are. Yeah, we're almost there. Now, retightening these or rechecking them in about a week is a very good idea, just to make sure. If you get any chirp from the belts, that just means that they've stretched a little bit, and you just need to tighten them up a tiny bit, rather than over tighten them to begin with. There we are. There we go, I'm happy with that. Now that we've done that, this is the lock bolt that locks the adjuster in place and make sure that it doesn't back off. So we're gonna tighten that one up right now. There we go. So now the belts are on. Now all we need to do is reconnect the air intake pipe. I'm just gonna put these back where they were. Okay, so first of all, what we'll do before we forget is we're going to get this seated properly on the intake side of that pipe. And we're going to make sure that it feeds correctly into that groove and that slot there, okay? So I'll bring you around closer so we can see. There we are. Take this, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing it while it's in my hand, and that way I can feel it slot in properly and all the way, and I can make sure that none of those little tangs on it have gone awry and are on the wrong side. So we want to be careful how we wiggle this up. There we go, perfect seal. And that little tab, there's a plastic tab on here, and we want that to sit on top of that bracket. And that way we can get this 10mm nut back in. But before we do, we're gonna put some Never Sees on it. And that way it won't be a problem to get it out again down the road when this intake pipe has to come off again. There we are, so we'll put that in by hand, and then we'll carefully make sure we get it threaded properly. So I'm just using the thumb wheel part of my wrench just to make sure it threads up smoothly. There we are. Don't go over tight on it, just nice and snug. There we go. Now, next we want to connect these tubes. Make sure we don't forget any of those. Run that in there like that. And I'll move the pointy part around so that it won't make contact with the rad hose at any time. And then we'll reconnect this line here. Like that. We've got one more piece to put back together. That's this guy right here. This is the elbow that goes from this part over to the mass airflow sensor. On there's a Phillips, or probably an 8mm, I think that's an 8mm bolt head, or a Phillips, and it's just a lot easier to use a stubby to get in there and do that. Like that. There, and tighten it up right away before you do anything else, because people forget to do that. There. Yeah, nice and tight. And then last one, 10mm right here. And there we are, all done. So I hope that helps you guys. If you like the video, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. I'll make more videos for you soon. And if you have any suggestions on videos you'd like to see, feel free to put them in the comments. Thanks for watching.